Right, hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Today, my name's Julia Kirby-Smith, and I'm joined by three different retailers. We're going to be talking about independent food retail, challenges, learnings, and success stories. So I want to just start by doing a brief intro to everyone here. We've got Phil Haughton next to me. Phil runs Better Food in Bristol, established in 1992. Better Food now has 3 locations all around the city. Four, there we go. Many of them combined with cafes and as a sort of, one-stop shop grocery store selling organic produce, and has been, awarded many accolades and awards over the years. We have Josh from Goodery in Norwich. Goodery is an online organic food platform. You do local home deliveries, and you also have a market garden, so you're growing your own produce for sale. And then we have Dan Monks from Unicorn Grocery in Manchester. Unicorn established in 1996, I think, a workers' cooperative, a really interesting business model, a real sort of pillar of the community, and amazing grocery store. So I wanted to start with a tiny bit of kind of audience interaction. So I wanted to ask you all here to just raise your hands to these questions. So who here regularly buys a veg box or gets a milk delivery, some kind of home delivery food thing? Okay, quite a lot of hands, I'd say more than 50%. Who here regularly goes to a specialist independent, so a butcher, a fishmonger, a greengrocer? Again, good show of hands, probably 60% more or more. Who here regularly goes to an independent grocery shop? Quite a few, quite a good number, about 50%. And then who here mainly goes to the supermarket? And again, quite a lot of hands, not quite so straight up in the air, slightly sheepish. For those people that raise their hands slightly sheepishly about the supermarkets, do not feel bad. Currently in the UK, some 95% of all food sales go through the major 9 supermarkets. And that means the independent food retail sector is really that 5% of market share. It is small. My name's Julia, I'm from Better Food Traders. So we're a UK organisation that supports independent food retail, but in particular, retailers who are focused on selling organic and agroecological produce. So our members include shops, veg box schemes, farmers markets, some wholesalers, food hubs, that kind of thing. And we really feel strongly that we need to be growing this sector. We need to be growing independent food retail and those short supply chains and direct routes to market. So we're here today to talk and learn from these 3 incredible businesses. And we're going to start with some questions around challenges. Obviously, it is a tough time. It's not easy in food retail. I ran my own food business for a few years, and yes, it feels like challenges are many. We're going to start with business costs. Phil, tell us what's your experience been?
I think just to give it a little bit of broader context, we know that since the pandemic, the economic backdrop has meant that there's been a squeeze for just about every business due to costs. I mean, the energy one that we all know about, both at home and in business, was huge and is still very, very evident in the commercial sector for sure. Alongside that, you would have expected things like, for instance, rents and rates to be in line with the economic downfall. Yes, thank you. But they really haven't. I mean, landlords have, generally speaking, been pushing on and up, and councils have been so strapped for cash. You know, if we think we've got problems, just look at your local council. They're pretty much all bankrupt and providing less and less service. So that's a kind of backdrop. When it gets particular to the food sector, our backdrop, our biggest backdrop is the competition on price around supermarkets. So we can't, if our remit is we want to, justice for all in the whole food chain, in order to do that, we want to look after every player, whether it's actually going even further back to the land, to the soil. We want to make sure that we're compensating farmers enough to be able to invest in their land and look after it as best possible. We want to be able to look after the people, the artisan bread makers, etc. We want to be able to look after the staff. And then still we go to our supermarket shelves and do a comparison between them and us. And it's very, very difficult to get anywhere near. And the staffing costs, we're a part of the Real Living Wage Foundation, which I'll tell you, it took us about 7 years to get there, just because it was so tough to actually make the books balance. But in the last 3 years, we had a 10% increase, another 10% increase a year later. And then this one is, for us, is going to, just to hold on, is going to turn out at about 7%. So within 25 months, you've got 25, 26, 27% increase on the wage bill. Now, you cannot translate that into the shelf edge price. So you've got to be really creative around it. So there are a lot of costs that have really pushed and pushed and pushed us. So we have to be more and more creative and dynamic about what do we do, what do we cut? And you've got to be careful, because if you start cutting, you can go into a kind of spiral of cut, 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 cut. So I think it's really important for our sector to be creative and dynamic in their thinking about how we move forward with this and become the leaders that we actually are. But sometimes it's easy to miss how we are setting some agendas, because we're also following largely what consumers are used to, which is the supermarket setting the agendas. The supermarkets set the agendas on price. They set the agenda on packaging, on, you know, the kind of fresh produce that you buy is in plastic, it's washed significantly. And the whole kind of promotional field is driven very largely by the supermarkets. You know, somebody said that Waitrose have something like 37% of their product range is on offer at any one time. That's a lot. And it doesn't, so yeah, so we are kind of, to a degree, we have to pay attention to what's going on out there and then look at how do we offer value that is not just about price.
Thanks, Phil. And we are going to dig into lots of those things in more depth. Just to sort of come back to the context that the business costs, how do you feel, Josh? How do costs feel to you at the moment? What's changed over the last 24 months?
A lot. The change is all one way. I think I'd just echo that. It's wages. Horticulture costs have the inflation has been massive. I think, was it 15% in 1 year? And that doesn't, you know, oh, inflation's coming down, but the price isn't coming down. It stays up there, which means that the produce that we're buying, it is that much more expensive. So, okay, well, do we just shrink the size of our box? So we're a veg box company, so it's not so much people coming in and picking things off the shelves, but we're supplying a set value box at a range of sizes and values, with the option of adding various things. So it's, you know, there's the decisions to make about well, we'll get onto the decisions, but we drive around in little electric vans around quite a vast expanse of Norfolk, and that price has gone up a lot, the price of electricity. So when we thought we were really ahead of the curve and winning on our fuel costs, it would be cheaper to drive around with diesel, which is a bit depressing. Bit of shame, especially with the capital outlay for an electric van. It was quite high, although Europe paid for half of it. So thanks to you. I think and the rest I just echo. It's the business costs have gone up, and the decisions then come and go, well, how do you respond to that?
Is that also seen at Unicorn? Does that reflect what you're experiencing?
Well, we had a very noticeable downturn in about 2021, 22. And obviously food inflation, I think it hit its peak in March 23. It was about 19%. And we noticed it straight away in impact in sales. And so our approach was to really simplify what we were doing, consolidate. Obviously our hours and our wage, our labour is our most expensive overhead. So looked at, things that we consolidated ranges on things. We looked at what sold, what didn't, where there were margins, where we could let something go, and anything that took extra time, be it invoicing or putting on the shelf or whatever. So we really stripped things back, which I think has actually worked really well. So we've had our wages, we also didn't increase our wages for 18 months, which was really hard. And we all noticed it because, we're at the lower end of pay, or we were at the time. And we, took some really kind of prudent decisions back then. And since we have kind of come out the other side and have recovered quite a bit, we've had 3 wage increases since then and are now well back above inflation.
You're also a cooperative, aren't you? So everyone is paid the same.
Flat pay.
Yeah.
So we're all paid the same hourly wage, which is currently £16, hopefully going to be £16.50 soon. But I think it was just really focusing in on the kind of simplicity of what we do well, which very much harks back to the foundations and the principles that we were founded on. And there is this kind of, what's amazing about a co-op is there's this real sort of inbuilt, what would be the word? Like we're sort of parsimonious, or we're very careful about how we spend money because we don't see it as ours. There's this real kind of culture of stewardship and custodians, and we reuse a lot of stuff. We wear really scruffy uniforms. We write on scrap bits of paper. And it's not a kind of deliberate thing, I don't think, but we're just quite cautious in our spending. And that makes it sound like we're tight, and we're not tight because we reinvest so much money into ourselves and our suppliers and our community, but it sort of naturally creates this quite, cautious approach to spending, I think.
Do you find it hard to keep staff in that case, or to find the right people?
We definitely had quite a big exodus after COVID. I think there was a big sort of reassessment of lots of people's sort of what they were doing, and the pay wasn't keeping up with expectations of how hard the work was. So we definitely lost a few people then. But no, mostly we have really, really good longevity of staff. I mean, I've been there well over 10 years, and there's some of my colleagues have been there since almost the start. There's several that are here with me in Oxford have been here more than 20. So it supports a very nice kind of whole lifestyle, I think, because of the benefits that we're able to offer ourselves.
And Josh and Phil, how do you find finding the right staff and staff retention? Is that a challenge at the moment?
It's for us, it's been quite volatile. I mean, in Bristol, for people renting in the rental market, it's very tough. We attract a lot of, I'd call them thinking people who are on a journey in the world, who come in and think, I really like what this company stands for, I'd like to get involved for a while, but it's not a career move. And so we invite that. It's a learning place as well as other stuff. But we know that several of them in the past year, and same last year, said, I can't go on living in Bristol. And so they've actually left, gone back to parents or whatever it is. And we know that story around for a lot of people. Beyond that, we have a kind of more typical hierarchical structure of you would expect of a business, where the people who have got the most responsibility on their heads are being paid the most. And we've certainly found that we've had to push that up to get the right people, but we feel like now we're at a point where we've probably got the best team we've ever had, both at senior leadership level and then at store management level and kind of cross-company management level. And and I feel like there's never been a time where we need such good people because of the challenges in front of us. And I really like what you were saying about in 2021 that you simplified. Our theme for this year is less is more. So we're behind that curve significantly, but I can really see the benefits, and it made me want to jump into your accounts books and see what tail you've cut out and see how your dynamics are. Because we really need, in order to be profitable, which we haven't been for quite some time, we need to shift quite a lot. But yeah, we're finding some good people, and the way you look after people can bring out the best in. If we haven't done quite such a good job at looking after people, people haven't come forward with their best. So I think there's a whole story around that as well.
Something to learn there. Sort of sticking with challenges, just because in a way I kind of want to get those out of the way and then we can move on. But we haven't really talked about customer numbers kind of explicitly. So, I mean, Josh, what have you seen? There was obviously, you were actually set up during COVID, weren't you? So you kind of saw that, I think, that surge in interest that we saw where people noticed we've got empty supermarket shelves, thought about their local food systems. Tell us about how you got started and then what you've seen since.
Yeah, so we were set up in response to the pandemic, really. There was an opportunity seen that initially it was frontline workers who were having to isolate from their families, who couldn't get hold of supermarket deliveries. And my wife's a nurse, and there was that sort of, oh, this is a real problem. And then that expanded to, okay, everyone needs good, healthy food to build their own personal resilience to disease, and that was on everyone's mind at the time, along with all the environmental and social ills that come from our current food system. So Goodery was set up as a response to all of that. And yeah, it was we were living in a weird world where, whilst everything else seemed to be collapsing, our veg box company was doing absolutely amazingly, and we're selling more veg boxes than, I mean, we were partnering with a historical veg box company who, Tony, who ran that, the veg box expert, wanted to retire, and so we took that on. But that had gone from sort of 150 boxes a month up to 320 boxes a month. So, I mean, we're still quite a small company, but there's, yeah, it's like ecosystems. You need small things. And we're, in some ways much bigger than the CSA down the road. So there's that. There's space for all these sizes. But
what have you seen since?
So since then,
journey
the world opened up, and we thought, well, we're going to be fine because this is just so much better than supermarkets. But actually, people quite like supermarkets. So no shame, guys who put their hands up. No judgment. So there's that was I guess a rude awakening of like, oh gosh, we're back down to, and it happened during summer as well, and it was sort of our first non-lockdown summer, and I don't know anyone involved with veg boxes here, like that in the summer everyone grows their own, people go on holiday, people who can afford to get organic veg boxes, I'm afraid to say, can afford also to go away for 4 weeks in the summer holidays. So yeah, there was that, and we were like, oh, this is a disaster, we've just halved our box numbers. That came back up in the winter, and we were like, wow, we're doing amazingly. Since then, we've realized there is an annual curve. And so after that sort of, what we saw as a crash, was actually just coming back to normal after the pandemic. We've seen steady growth since then, mainly because we have a loyal core of customers who tell others about it. And the reason it's not, I don't think I'm inaccurate in saying the reason it's not back up to 300 every week, although we're getting close to it, is because there's been so much movement, people moving away from the city, and people moving back to London, that kind of thing. So it's been very natural causes of churn, as opposed to you guys are just too expensive, or the quality's not good enough, or I just absolutely love Tesco's. So there was that initial, I just love Tesco's, their snacks are great, and you've just got like one selection of snacks. So yeah, I can't remember what the question was. I'm just babbling now. So.
Well, we were talking about sort of, I suppose that view on customer numbers and kind of where we are. Dan, where are you with customer numbers and, is cost of living?
Just about recovered to pre-COVID levels. We also saw patterns of shopping change massively in terms of, behaviour and frequency of visits and things. We went back to the model of one big weekly shop during COVID. So our average basket went up, but our customer numbers went down. And now we're seeing the return to kind of several shops a week. But yeah, we just had a completely sort of laser sharp focus on affordability. And we're in the centre of Manchester, well, we're just outside, but we have a Morrison's, an Asda, a Tesco, a Lidl and an Aldi all within walking distance of the shop. So we can't trade, in a vacuum, I guess. And so we made, I think most people do want to eat the best food that they can, but obviously price is a huge access sort of issue. And so with our focus, our focus is on staple ingredients for cooking. We always sort of avoid like associations with luxury or sort of a farm shop, even though many people do associate that with us anyway. So basics like onions, carrots, potatoes, anything that you put in a kind of, traditional stew, I guess. We monitor the prices in supermarkets. We used to monitor conventional prices, but that has just become unfeasible. So we now monitor organic prices, and we make sure that we're competitive with those. We make sure that we actually beat them. And if it means that we are selling below margin, then we'll take that hit. We don't spend anything on marketing in terms of advertising we have a very tight marketing budget that we use in-house for lots of comms and things, but we see that as a marketing spend. So we'll lose X amount of money on the price of something in order to kind of generate trust and reliability, and that then repays in loyalty and sort of customer standing over the years. But it's quite nerve-wracking thing to do. You have to look at the whole picture of the whole shop, and so long as margins reach the kind of target overall, then you're okay. But it doesn't feel good to be, because obviously we're not trying to scrimp at the grower level. We wouldn't want to pay anything less than they wanted. So the only room for manipulation is at what we sell it at. And I think there's also an argument there around the kind of, is it slightly immoral to be selling food, that isn't truly representative of the cost, because we're sort of shouldering that burden ourselves. But we make it balance, we make it work, and that's the sort of magic of it, I guess.
And it gets people through the door, I suppose. Yeah. So it's that kind of lost leader idea, I suppose. Yeah, I remember seeing a picture of your blackboard where you've kind of got the pricing, and I mean, the unicorn blackboard is this kind of, it looks like you check it on a weekly basis, don't you?
It's mind-numbing work. But it's also really interesting because also supermarkets don't tell you when they're putting their prices up. Obviously, they try and keep it as covert as possible. So, we are checking it because they don't tell you that they've put the cost of an organic cauliflower up by 20 pence, or they try and they do all mimic each other. When one person puts a price up, they all tend to follow. So there is a reliability, I think, with the price increases. It's not their headline or their marketing sort of lines that they go in for.
That's interesting. Phil, what's your approach?
You lost something, Guy.
Sorry,
That's all right.
Come on, play us a solo, guys.
Not an iPhone. Thank you.
And is this your pen?
No.
You can have
I've stolen it.
Phil, I was going to ask, what's your approach to pricing? Do you have sort of a fixed markup or margin, or like Dan, do you have a sort of...
It's a movable feast. We play the margins throughout the whole range up and down, and we will do price matching or price awareness every week on certain lines. and it changes depending on what's going on out there in the economy. I do want to just come back to that customer number and the spend that you were saying happened for you in 2021, 22. And I think for most of us it did. And I think it's really interesting psychologically to think what's happened to us in this country and probably many other countries, just from the point of view of coming out of COVID, where it strikes me where we were taught very well to be fearful and to withdraw. When the media got hold of a frenzy on energy and cost of living crisis, they just had a field day, they loved it. But of course I feel that we were very primed to then respond to that in quite a fearful way and withdraw. And I think that's part of the reason why price became king so hard and so fast. And the supermarkets with their power are able to be very aggressive about that. And so I think that's really attributable to some of that downfall. But it is interesting, isn't it, that as we sort of recover, if you want to call it a recovery, although I'm not sure it needs to be called that, we do find ourselves with less headroom for us to manoeuvre on price. And what else I wanted to say? I've lost my train of thought there, but there was another... sorry, folks. There was quite an important point, and I've just lost my train of thought.
It'll come back to you.
Which I've got a habit of doing. So go back to the question that you wanted to ask me.
Well, pricing,
Yeah.
I suppose there's always this tension, I think, around whether organic should be premiumised. Obviously, it does cost more, but how do we set prices? How do we explain them to customers?
Yeah.
You know, do we make it a sort of luxury, or do we talk about?
Yeah, I really
value?
think it's what are we trying to achieve? And I think if we go chasing prices all the time, which we certainly started to do more and more as a response to the cost of living crisis, trying to get people in. You know, we would do things like go and buy 10 pallets of oat milk in order to just get really, really low prices and knock everybody out the water. And it certainly had great footfall drivers, but it becomes something you chase and then you think, well, where's the value in what we offer? Where's the other elements of value? And what is value? You know, there's the experience, there's the love. I mean, love is something that we don't kind of necessarily overtly bring into retail very much. But to me, it's actually right at the heart of what we're about in terms of differential, in terms of value. You know, we're compassionate, we're nurturing, we want to give back to farmers, we want to nourish everybody in the food chain. And all those elements is, if you look at what's happening in the conglomerate world, for want of a better term, where it's just all about it being extractive, you're basically not giving people permission to come to work in a loving sense. It's like, I want to screw everything I can out of you, like the farmers, etc. And so we live in a society where what I call the Hoover, the conglomerate Hoover, is ever more efficient and ever more extractive and ever more dominant in terms of its power bases around the world. And so I think we have to almost kind of push all that ridiculousness back and say, what really matters? What is, and it does come back to human connection and inspiring people at another level. I was doing a talk at Bristol Zoo earlier this week. What was Bristol Zoo, which is now Wild Zoological Society or something. Anyway, they had a kind of away day, and there was 120 of them there, and we did these sessions with them. And you could see that the sort of penny was dropping around that conversation, because they also work in an area where, well, in a charity actually, but where there is care and compassion and wanting to make the world a better place. And so we had some really interesting conversations about what it is that creates value and what it is that you inspire people to come through your door. Is it price? If you go chasing price, are we actually, you know, you were talking about, you know, is it ethical to be hitting that price? I'm not arguing against it at all. I'm really not. But if we chase their prices on everything all the time, it becomes a never-ending task to the bottom in a way.
It is difficult, and I think that, yeah, the challenge for independent food retailers in the organic sector is you can kind of never win that game. You know, you're never going to win on price. So I understand that, you know, getting people through the door and having that offer that feels accessible is important, but it's how you frame it. I guess if you're framing it as it's because you're a community enterprise, you're cooperative, you're kind of...
Well, it's a belief that good food should be accessible to everybody, and organic doesn't necessarily have to cost that much more. I mean, it was just mentioned in the talk I was in last, but obviously it's said repeatedly at this event. It's not, really, organic is the old conventional, you know, it's where we came from. And there definitely is a premium that's just whacked on as a kind of commodified value at the point of exchange rather than necessarily reflecting a higher cost. And obviously things like huge increases in the price of fertiliser is shifting the balance a bit because inputs are becoming much more costly. But yeah, I do think there is a moral imperative to think about, you know, access and who can afford this and how are we feeding everybody. And I think that's what drives our mission with affordability.
I'll just point to a bit of research actually that was done by the Organic Research Centre and UK Organic this year that was really interesting. So they did some consumer research that interviewed some 2,000 plus people. And the findings from that we found really useful in that actually the most committed organic buyers, the people regularly buying, you know, multiple organic items in their shop, are not who you think they are. They're not the kind of wealthy, bougie buyers. They're actually more likely to be people on low to middle incomes. They're more likely to be people in rented accommodation. They're more likely to be singles and young families. So that whole kind of stereotype of kind of what organic is and who organic shoppers are, I think we really, really need to, you know, dig into that. And
it's an artifice, isn't it?
Yeah, and it shows you people, you know, they are also price sensitive, but not, you know, that's not why people are motivated, I think. And
it's funny because most of the accusations that we get, I mean, this is purely anecdotal, of being kind of, you know, I don't know, what was the sort of snooty and, you know, posh or whatever, it tends to come, I think, from wealthier people that just have an assumption because they don't have to look at the price of onions when they go into a shop because it doesn't matter to them because... So it's based purely on kind of, what they assume rather than actually what they know.
Actually going in and looking at the numbers. Josh, just to pull you in, what's your experience of pricing? And I know you mentioned to me there was actually some bravery in raising your prices at one point this year. And just talk us through how you've approached pricing.
Yeah, it's helpful to justify it to myself like that. We're doing the brave thing.
I gave the word bravery, so we'll go with that.
So we did loss-leading items mainly through negligence and incompetence, getting our spreadsheet formulae wrong. So like, oh gosh, we've been selling eggs at a loss for 3 months. But it's good for Maple Farm. Mike in here? No. So we've never meant to lose money on things, but we certainly have done. I think the realization that you've got to be realistic in business, and this is costing us this much. We're paying people this much. We can't reduce that. We can't reduce our energy prices. We can't reduce the price of anything that we do. Except that you can, but we'll come on to that. But those basic foundational costs are fixed or going up. And so you can either just go out of business and then everyone you serve loses your service, or you say, well, let's put 10% on. And actually 5% of that, we're going to increase the amount of value that's going into the box. 5% of that we'll use to cover costs. Now, actually, the last couple of price increases, we have put purely into, for the veg boxes, that is, we've put purely into more produce in the box to give customers a better value. And it is that belief, you know, we're not just a business for profit, we're a CIC, a community interest company. So our social value, a lot of it is environmental and the protection of our soil in our region. but it's also about the increase of consumption of organic food for Norwich and the surrounding areas. So that's written into our constitution, and therefore we can justify keeping our prices lower than maybe we should as a limited company that is there to make profit. So a CIC limited by shares, we are, as a director of that, I have to try and make it make profit so that I can reinvest it in the community. And I think one of the best exercises for not realizing value in the sense that, oh, there's money in the bank, but actually cognitively realizing the value of things was starting our market garden 2.5 years ago, and realizing, my goodness, the price we're selling food at doesn't make sense. Even at our, I guess from someone who's buying conventional, one of my growers is just with it. Hi, Amelia. She's never like that at the farm, don't worry. I've lost my train of thought now.
So what do you learn by starting to grow yourself?
Yeah, essentially that it's mad, the price that we're charging for food. It should be much more. However, it can't be, because there's a cost of living crisis, because people are paying so much on rent and mortgages. And this then goes to a whole massive conversation about, which I don't think we need to go into.
But it's cultural as well, isn't it? Because we have one of the lowest spends per household on food.
Yeah.
In Europe,
It was in the papers this week. I think after the US, Ireland, and somewhere else, we pay the lowest, percentage of household income on food. Go to Italy, go to France. People understand that there's value in paying more. It's cultural.
And I said this to my brother-in-law, and he said he got quite upset. He's like, you can't say that food's too cheap. Because he'd just gone and paid a significant amount of his expendable income at Tesco's just buying the basics for his family of 6. And so I think part of the reason that there's that culture, yes, one it is cultural, post-war, convenience food, all of that. But part of it is that we have a weird economy that massively overvalues ownership, and therefore rents and mortgages are inflated compared to France and Italy and Poland, where people can actually afford to spend more of their income on food. And you don't have to decrease rent or mortgage that much to, essentially double your food spend. Mm-hmm. So it's, yeah.
I'll come to that. We will talk about rent and mortgages in the context of retail, actually, so we'll talk about that in a second. Just to finish on the thing around pricing, what happened when you put your veg box price up by 10%?
Yeah, we lost one customer.
Yeah.
And actually that week we gained 3.
Okay.
So essentially, I think we probably tend to be much more obsessed with our prices than our customers are. Mm-hmm. Because we think it's the big thing about what we do. It's because it's the thing that we're worrying about the whole time. It's the thing that we're pegging everything else against. Whereas actually our customers are much more worried about the experience they get when they open their door and their veg box is there, or the driver's smiling at them. And they think, oh, that's a decent veg box. Oh, look at that lovely squash from Wakelands.
That's what they're paying for. They're paying for a delicious product, a nutritious product, a really good service. They're not necessarily worrying about that.
If I cook for some friends and I've cooked from a squash, let's say I didn't run Goodery, but let's say I got a Goodery box and this squash was grown 20 minutes away by these amazing guys, Amelia included, and they, this is what they do, and this is really cool. That's a much better experience than I got this from Tesco's, and actually it doesn't taste as good. Mm-hmm. So, produce quality and experience, and so that, one of the, being a veg box company, presentation is, we've realized, is so important. Mm-hmm. Because we could put, £10 worth of produce in the veg box and it could look rubbish. And so having that balance and having that, you know, or here's a nice big cabbage or squash, here's the nice little fruity items, here's the mushrooms and whatever else, and you get a good experience, you get a good story for the people that you're cooking for. And that sounds kind of selling a story. That is a real part of food.
Food is so sort of sensual, isn't it? I mean, I think one of the things that really benefits us, we partly as just a practical means, we sell everything loose because it's cheaper for us to buy it in bulk. And that's part of the kind of added, you know, we pass that value on. But also it results in this really beautiful shopping experience where you get to touch, you know, smell and actually kind of experience it. And it's not behind a layer of plastic or in a fridge and I think, you know, food's so emotive, isn't it? And that's partly why people get defensive when you bring up the conversation. And why love is such an important, you know, the word that we always use with Unicorn is we want people to experience joy when they shop with us. We want it to be a joyful experience. And I think that's the thing that we sort of try and attach onto. If we're gonna change things, it's got to be through positive action and through people feeling good about it. And that, you know, there's so much happening in the wider conversation around nutrition and UPFs and why it's so much more important. So I think there's a huge sort of tide of enthusiasm headed towards actually maybe spending a bit more on food and maybe investing a bit more. And even, you know, it could have a massive cost saving further down the line because obviously it's great for prevention, isn't it, in lots of... which I guess is then an argument for some sort of state intervention because it could you know, lessen the burden on the health service if we're feeding ourselves a better diet. But that's a bigger question.
Yes, that is a big question. Also kind of on my list. We'll come to that.
You make that decision here. You put your hand up. I want to talk to you.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Phil, what's your approach to this idea of, I guess, sort of presentation and service and, you know, that actually maybe that's what customers are coming to the independent sector for. It's the experience of shopping, you know, not in a sort of bleak, strip-lit supermarket. They're wanting something quite different, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, be careful about segmenting it because there are lots of motivations for shopping in a shop like ours. There's a convenience factor. There's, you know, I'm on my way home. I know that they've got milk and butter and I'll get a couple of other bits. It's motivated by that. And if you can inspire that person, they might well go further, but they might not. There's a special diet. I need my gluten-free or I need my vegan or I need my whatever it is. And then there's a kind of thinking about the world more, which is thankfully I think represents a reasonable percentage of our people, and I think that's the segment that's quite interesting. Is why do they come to us? They come to us because they like because it's that sort of thing of I identify with that culture, that environment, and that purpose. And that's where, you know, they immediately get the love. They are delivering that in all their daily lives, in their work and what have you, to a greater extent. Or they're not able to express it in their workplace, and it's so, I'm on my way home, it's such relief, I can go into better food, and I just feel better. I feel like I'm with people who care about what, you know, the things that are really important. So.
And is that, because that's tied into, I guess, the whole way your shops are laid out and the experience, and the fact you have cafes and you cook on the premises. But I know that you're thinking quite deeply about that business model.
If we go back to when I first opened this shop, that our mothership shop, if you like, was in 2001. And we'd just been a box scheme and home delivery and of groceries and stuff before that. So we transitioned into doing both. And we were really struggling in this premises. I mean, it was a down at heel area, very down at heel. And there were the kind of people who knew us and were very local who were coming in, but it was nothing like enough to make it sustainable. And there was a lot of people messaging around, oh, we don't go in there, they're organic, they're expensive. And in fact, when I was with those zoo people, I said, when I say organic, what's the first thing that comes into your mind? And price was right up, you know, oh, it's expensive. You know, that is a perception out there that it's expensive. Anyway, so the start of this shop, we weren't known, but it was, they're the organic people, they're going to be expensive, I'm not going there. When we opened a cafe in there, that gave people a different reason. They didn't have to think about, that place isn't for me. It's like, I'm just going in for a cup of tea, a cup of coffee. And then once they were in, it was like, oh, I quite like the feel of this. I'm just going to have a quick look around while I'm here. And it started to really transition, and we became a very vibrant community store as a result.
It's finding that place where people feel comfortable, isn't it? And it's, and I think that act of actually sitting and eating is often the starting point.
Yeah, but the look and feel is vital, you know, the messaging that goes with it. If you just simply say there's an expensive butternut squash, go down to Tesco's and you can get it for less than half price. If you actually try and, well, you're in a position where you can do it to a greater degree through the communication of small numbers. But if you actually say this is a squash that was grown at the community farm 5 miles away or whatever, that's immediately, it builds value, it builds a sense of connection, and there are lots of people who really appreciate that, and it's then worth it.
Yeah. And Josh, I feel like that connection that you've built with your customers then extended into your experience of crowdfunding. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so we did 2 crowdfunds in a year, which is, I wouldn't recommend. But we did the first one, and then I think it was in the last week of the crowdfund, they were like, by the way, you can get match funding. It's like, well, amazing. Not on this one. You'll have to do another one. Like, oh, great. So, but the response from our customers who were enthusiastic about what we wanted to do at the market garden, beyond any reward. So actually the second crowdfund, because we wanted the same people to donate so that we could get the match funding from Wild Isles and Aviva. Thank you guys. We actually gave a lot more reward in the second crowdfund. So that was less of a, hey guys, you just really love us, so help us out here. Whereas the first one was very much that. And we aimed really high, and we didn't actually reach our target. But thankfully, we clicked the box that said we'll keep it anyway before we started fundraising. But I think the key lesson was that the people who buy food from us really care about us, and they actually really like us, and that was a great thing. And I think one of the feelings at the end of the crowdfund was, oh, we haven't just blown it here. Like, we haven't, even though we didn't get the target, we haven't just wasted our opportunity. We've, and wasted all of our social capital that we've built with our customers. We've actually built it because we've communicated more of our story. We can now show, and we probably haven't done a good enough job of showing what we've done with that money. That's on my to-do list. But we can now show those people who are enthusiastic about what we do, what we've been able to do with that money. So we've put a little greenhouse, which transforms the seed sowing process at the Goodery garden, and we don't have to transport seedlings back and forth from Norwich. It's a mad system.
Happy seedlings.
Yeah. So
you've got sort of tangible things to show, and you've built this amazing.
And we can invite those people
community
to come.
It's a form of marketing, isn't it? Crowdfunding.
So we essentially said, right, scrap the marketing budget. We now, it's all a farm budget. Because we didn't expect the farm, and we still don't expect the farm to be break even for probably another couple of years. So that's sort of 4 or 5 years of spending money on a farm that is great in the summer and is costing us quite a lot for the rest of the year, or great in summer and autumn. But viewing it as an asset, and not in a cynical way, but in a really loving way. This is an asset that people want to see how the food is grown. And we can do that through relationships with the veg growers at Wakelands and Maple Farm in Suffolk and Thornage Hall in Norfolk, and also the bigger farms like Foskett Farms, who we go and collect from. And we can take pictures with Nicola, who's this ginormous Romanian guy. He's just like holding bunches of carrots because I mean, they grow carrots in a way that would be horrifying to us, I think. But they're organic, and it's like, well, we need them. So, yeah.
Can I just turn to Dan? I know you're also brilliant at sort of building that customer loyalty, and I think part of it is your longevity at Unicorn and just being this kind of part of the community. But you're also really good at you do customer surveys and things like that, don't you? Tell us about your kind of customer engagement work.
Yeah, well, we offer a kind of calendar of customer engagement events over the year. We do a wine tasting in December, which costs us, I think it's £5 a ticket, and everybody leaves quite pissed. So it's like, and we see all of these things. It's like we celebrate our birthday every year. We get Tibetan Kitchen, who are a local Tibetan kitchen, and we give away free food and cake and have like a big party, and that sort of sense of giving people something, even within the shop itself. We have a free box, which is part of kind of, circularity and reducing waste. But if we don't think something's good for sale, we just put it in this box. And sometimes people can get a real bounty. And actually, some people come in and just take stuff in a free box and then go out, because I think actually access to free fruit and vegetables is, you don't tend to get it in food banks. There's very few outlets for that. But yeah, I guess just people, down to little things, like we don't have any self-service tills. We want people to have an interaction at the point of sale, and we don't play music in the shop. There's loads of sort of little considerations to the shopping experience of how to make it a bit more stress-free and pleasurable. But yeah, it breeds a real sense of loyalty. So the thing that we can notice from our surveys is the longer people have shopped with us, the more reasons they give for doing so. So the kind of values that we promote and live by and invest in become more apparent the more engaged you become as a customer. And that embeds this sort of, this loyalty and wanting to stay with us, I guess.
Yeah, really nice. Just to go to, I suppose, something a bit more operational, but what's your view on sort of collectivism? I know you do kind of bulk buying at Unicorn and how that works. Josh, I know you've teamed up with Cambridge Organic and you started working with another enterprise and how that works. So can we just talk about that, the sort of idea of how do you create scale amongst kind of smaller, these kind of SME food enterprises? How do you achieve that? So Dan, do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Well, it's a really fundamental part of our business model to have a large warehouse space, so that we can buy direct and we can buy in bulk, which gives us then the possibility of negotiating on price. And, if you're buying by the pallet load, you get a better deal. And then passing that on. It's interesting what you say about special offers, because we hardly ever have anything on special offer on the basis that we are trying to sell it at the cheapest price possible. So there is no room to, do a bog off or... But yeah, it's a real tricky thing to achieve because it requires a huge amount of storage space. We have tiny fridges, far, far smaller than they really need to be. So it's backbreaking from our perishables, fresh produce. Like the turnaround, we don't really have anything in the building for longer than about 48 hours because we haven't got space to keep it. And we could, by scaling that, if we did have a bigger space, we could make massive savings. Even just things like, this is a really practical, boring point, but our fridge is open and you can't wheel a full industrial pallet into the fridge. So you've got to skim bits off the top before you can even get it into the fridge to start processing. And all these little things are possibilities of time saving and physical savings as well, because it's backbreaking work. It's really, really hard graft, and none of us are getting any younger, and it sort of starts to show in your body. But yeah, it's something that I think about a lot. How do we collectivise the power and then spread the benefit of buying food? This is why co-ops are such a great solution, and where they kind of emerged from in the first place is, and I think that, wholesalers have a role to play. We buy from Organic North, who I think are going to be here. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, around somewhere. Yeah, absolutely. I think that...
But it's space.
It's that, you need that combination of space.
And
what have you found, Josh, working with, it's Cambridge Organic, isn't it? How's that worked out? What have you been doing with them?
Yeah, so we, Duncan, who founded Cambridge Organics, COFCO, as it used to be, was we were talking at, I can't remember what we were talking about. Anyway, we met and we were talking about the shared values that we have and why don't we work together. And eventually that became a conversation about how do we actually work together to make this easier for them to buy more peppers or aubergines from Europe, for example, in the springtime, so that they can get actually a whole pallet rather than 3/4 of a pallet, which massively reduces the price per aubergine, all of that. Again, all of these sort of, in terms of what do you do about all this expense, it's, these are the little practical things, the marginal gains. And sometimes you can ignore the marginal gains because you think, well, the problems are so huge, but actually they really matter.
There's also, an issue with the problem with fruit and veg is that it's starting to decay from the moment it arrives with you. So we have this very strict sort of approach of not buying too much and not generating waste, which is why supermarkets have shelves that are full most of the time. And you don't want to just, to us or to small retailers, the difference between half a pallet and a full pallet can be a huge amount of waste or mold, and it's such a depressing thing to see when you buy too much and you have nowhere to put it. So you have to be really cautious and you have to be really sensible in the amounts that you're buying. There isn't just this scope to just buy a shitload.
It is quite interesting, the different models, because our collaborations are more with brands,
Right.
As opposed to other retailers. We do some really great collaborations with growers like the community farm down not far from us, which we had a big hand in helping to set up. So we'll share pallets, but we will go and work with a brand who have got some new products that we're interested in and create more merchandising around those and do price points around those. So there's Ibis rice, which I don't know if you've got hold of Ibis rice, either of you, but it's the most wonderful product with every possible wonderful credential around it, which has recently been launched. They've actually managed to find a way of bringing the price down by bringing in massive containers and extending their product range to make sure that they can sell all of it out in a period of time. But we want to work very actively with them on a kind of an environmental campaign basis, but let's celebrate the hell out of this, give it lots and lots of space and get the price down so that it's more accessible. And Guy, who was very involved with it, I was speaking to yesterday, said that it's, what's that, Tilda rice? We all know the brand Tilda rice, don't we? Well, apparently they are match pricing that at retail level. And we've been stocking it for a while and already promoted it a lot, but they've kind of moved on to the second stage and expanded their range. So there are opportunities like that. And then when it comes to citrus season, for instance, we will bring in a pallet of nothing but oranges and then just go really, really low margin on it and just give everybody a great celebration with the story of oranges. And I can't quite believe how many oranges walk out our doors every single day. It's just astonishing. But people just love it. And they say, when are they coming in the next year? It's like, because it's only the best part of the orange season is really only from kind of latter end of November, beginning of December, through to end of February. That's the best bit of it.
I mean, that's the other thing that indie food retail does so well, I think, is sort of celebrating the seasons and really going, get your oranges now because they're in season, not they're just going to sit there all year round exactly the same in their pack of 6 in plastic, and that's kind of what people connect with, isn't it? That buzz of like, right now it's asparagus because it's actually asparagus.
It's really interesting, I think, because it relates to scarcity, which is not something that you want to promote when you're selling food, but is also a really important part of the conversation. And, seasons are so wonderful because they begin and they end, and you look forward to it. And, I hate winter, but it's my favourite time. I love pomegranates and European avocados and oranges, so that makes winter way nicer for me. But also this sense that you can't always have it is actually a good thing to educate around. It's not always available, and therefore it becomes more precious and more revered and more magical because it's only available for this specific few weeks of the year, and you can't
And it keeps your marketing fresh because you've just got something, every month you've got something else to tell people about.
And it's hopeful. Like you do get into, when you're I was a buyer for many years in the fruit and veg, and when you see on the list the first mention of something, it's like, oh, yeah, I forgot about it. Or it's a really nice mindset. It's sort of full of optimism, I think.
If you've seen what's happened to rhubarb, which we used to have this thing called the rhubarb triangle, well, we kind of still do in the UK. And it was traditionally it's where a lot of rhubarb was grown. And a part of every farm used to have the forced rhubarb in a house, which was pink and lovely. But now you almost get nothing but that pink, lovely rhubarb. And that's the only thing that the caterers and restaurants want. And then it's kind of gone. And the true rhubarb, the traditional rhubarb, is something, it's only down to retailers like us that put it out there much. You hardly even see it in the supermarkets, apart from the pink varieties. So it is, I think, the celebration of the seasons and what the natural life cycle of that product is, I think, is something that we do best by a country mile, generally, I would say. I haven't been to Unicorn for ages, but I was really impressed with your produce when I was there. And produce is probably one of my biggest passions.
Yeah, mine too.
I'm going to turn now to some questions because we've got some great questions from our online live stream audience, and also anyone here if you'd like to put hands up. But I'll start with one from online. This is from Carly Trisgrove. Assuming Unicorn turn a profit and noting Phil's company's currently loss-making, is this just a numbers game? Can the books be balanced once the footfall hits a certain point, or is that too simple? Phil?
I think this is just so interesting, and it's lovely sharing this platform. Like I say, we're a hierarchical, very normal style business. I am 95% the owner of this business, and here you are with this wonderful, very long-lived and successful cooperative. And I want to take lots of leaves out of that book, and I'm not sure I could ever go there myself, but maybe somebody could follow me and find a way of doing it for better food. I think there are lots of pros and cons. I would say that in answer to that question, it's not necessarily about scale, because I bet you any money that if we put our sets of accounts up beside each other, what you would see is their spending on marketing or their spending on such and such was much lower than ours as in relation to the overall turnover. So we turn over about 7.5 million with 4 stores, and you probably do
9 million last year.
Yeah, in one store. I mean, that is
over 6 million in purely organic sales, apparently.
Woo.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing, absolutely incredible. So, you've found an amazing site and it's worked really well. And a lot of shops, even London stores, would die for that kind of turnover. But I think there is a lot to be said for scale isn't everything, and keep innovating and thinking about what is the best structure for your path, if you like. So, if we want to, I want to see thousands of stores like ours, like yours, around the country, because we so need it. We need to feed people, and supermarkets, etc. They don't really feed people. They're on the backs of a whole load of shit in the way of brands that are turning out fast food. And that thing of us spending less per capita percentage-wise on food is music to their ears, because it gives them an ever more opportunity to manipulate the food market and the food processing to feed us. Oh, look, you can buy that for less and less and less, and we can put less and less actual food in it. So I think there's some really exciting and interesting things that will develop out of different avenues of co-op, of a small indie on their own, or a chain of 4, which is what we've got, or going up to 20 or 30. But the one thing I do know is whichever model it is, the common theme is love, care and compassion in the world, and we need so much more of it.
It's a very nice sentiment. Do we have any questions here? Yeah, we've got quite a few. Start with the lady in the stripy top. We've got a microphone.
Hi. on? Is it on? Oh, sorry, I just wasn't close enough. Hi. I have one question about produce. What is your kind of buying hierarchy in terms of like certified organic, local, like what? And if you have any particular choices that were like difficult, why did you come down on those? And if I could just be cheeky, and one other is just if you were setting up again, or for those who kind of took on a business, what's the biggest mistake that you wish you had not made?
Okay, well, let's start with the first one kind of briefly, and then we can go to the what's your biggest mistake.
I can talk about how we source.
Yeah.
So with Unicorn as the sort of centre point, we follow like a radial approach. So if it's available close to home, we'll buy it and privilege it above something that's further away. We generally consider the season to be European-wide, so we sort of start in the north and bring it closer in. We do stock some tropical fruits and things that are only available from further afield because we want to have a comparable offer to supermarkets. So we sell bananas year-round, for example, and we do import apples during the Southern Hemisphere season. Just for those, there's no kind of straightforward answer to it, but we want to people that don't have any idea about all of this kind of ethics and principles to still be able to come and get a kind of typical basket. Only organic. We have certification from Soil Association that every single one of our growers has to be certified. We keep up-to-date records. And because we sell it all loose, we can't distinguish between, so we don't sell any conventional. We do have non-organic products in the rest of the shop. Again, for sort of considerations of things like there's a huge discrepancy between like almonds. Organic almonds cost about twice as much as conventional. So in order to have a kind of option that is more affordable, we consider every line based on these sorts of credentials. And we don't fly anything. That's our other kind of hard and fast rule. And we tend to avoid growers that have like an organic wing. You know, we want to support growers who are fully into the philosophy, and we see that as, with the exception of bananas, because there aren't any that we can find that will deliver.
Thank you. Josh?
Yeah.
Fairly brief.
Pretty much identical, except not focused on the north, focused on the east. Sorry, I forgot the microphone's there. Yeah, we don't fly anything. We will focus on small, and we've also got to focus on scale. So we start with the market garden. You know, we have to sell all of that, and then other local farms, and we will prioritize small local growers over the large local growers, like the big 100, 3,000 acre farms, because that's we believe that small scale is the future for an equitable food system. So identical, but that, yeah.
Yeah.
Same, very largely. The only difference in terms of certified organic is that we now work with a couple of very small local CSA growers where we know them, we know what they're doing, but they're not actually certified.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
But yeah.
And then that second question, what was your biggest mistake? So Dan, do you want to start with that?
Well, obviously Unicorn's been around for a lot longer than I've been there, but I think the lesson I've learned from wiser colleagues is just caution and just looking at this balance between sales and hours. So it doesn't matter if you're selling less, but your hours have got to be reduced in order to meet that, and it's this constant balance. And don't offer a job to somebody that you can't guarantee you'll be able to pay for, because I also work for a market garden group in Manchester called Manchester Urban Diggers, sorry. And they are brilliant, really innovative and amazing. But they keep hiring all the time, and it makes me very nervous as the kind of in their directorial position of these are livelihoods, and you know, as soon as you sign a contract with somebody, you're responsible for them. And the thing I keep saying is we need to build cash reserves. We have to have cash in the bank, and they ignore me, but that would be my advice to them.
Yeah, Josh.
Yeah, not having cash reserves, that would be that's one of the big mistakes. And I think in a similar way, we had someone working very closely with us in the office who we loved, and who'd been working with us since the very beginning. And we didn't face the music quickly enough to realize that we could not afford to keep this position open. It wasn't tenable for us, and we spent a lot of money that we didn't have keeping him on when it really wasn't. So face the music quickly if you have to. Be decisive. So it is about relationships. The whole thing is built on relationships. But in the end, I guess going back to that other question about the numbers game, the numbers are a vital representation of the relationships. Yeah. And if the numbers don't add up, you're in trouble. So we've been in trouble because we weren't paying attention to those, because we didn't want to. We were like, oh, maybe if this, if that, if this. Those ifs have to be, you have to be conservative with that when it comes to people's livelihoods. So, yeah.
Well, and there's nothing worse than having to let somebody go.
Oh, it was awful. It was awful, yeah.
Phil, how about you?
God, I need to keep it brief. I've been doing this since 1985. It was my first one-stop organic shop. The number of major cock-ups and errors that I regret are just, they're pages long. And I will carry on making them, I'm sure. I think the one thing that I've changed beyond all recognition is using words very much like should, ought, must, need, and trying to reverse that out to invitations. Because I've noticed how if you say to a farmer, for instance, you really should be doing this, you've immediately challenged them and put up a barrier. Where if you come, have you thought about another way of looking at this? Or it's an invitation. And in so many relationships, I've found that to be more and more important in cultivating access and diversity and inclusion, really. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I'll take another question from the live stream audience. So this is one from Connected Nature. What do panellists say about their role in educating and communicating the stories of a better food system, for instance, by showcasing their suppliers? Josh, do you want to start with that?
Yep, it's not just the responsibility, it's the way that it's going to work. If we don't, as someone who's selling, and I know there's price matching and everything like that, but we're selling food that is more expensive than people can get elsewhere. If we do not tell the story, if we do not, I slightly cringe at the word educate because it feels a bit preachy, but at the same time, hey, we've got knowledge to share. If we don't do that, we're not going to access those customers who are currently going through their weekly shops at Tesco's every week with no knowledge of us. I think one of the real eye-openers was when I did a market in the middle of Norwich, and so many people came out and said, oh, I've never heard of you. We've been going for 2 years. I've never heard of you. Well, where do you live? NR2. It's like, that's like our heartland. That's, the university, trendy bit of Norwich. And it's kind of, well, we are not doing a good enough job of, one, telling people that we exist, but also telling people why we exist and what the whole point is. So telling people why they should pay £1 more for an aubergine because we grew it compared to something that's been sprayed and singed some poor grower's hand in southern Spain. It's a vital part of it, not just from a moral standpoint, but from a business standpoint.
It's that connection, isn't it? So it's building that connection. Phil, what would you say to that?
I feel like I've already covered it with things like Ibis Rice and celebration of product groups and
what about sort of the better
the
food
invitation side of it. Sorry?
The better food system, the sort of big picture stuff, like how much do you go on, maybe what some people might consider a bit heavy, like those messages around, why this is urgent. Do you ever do sort of marketing around like the negatives of the food system, or do you keep it pretty positive?
We tend to keep it as positive as we possibly can. Yeah. I used to shout about the negatives and say you ought kind of feel about it, but actually no, I think we get so much more mileage from smiling at people and welcoming them and showing them great things that we're doing. There's no need to really, I mean, yes, sometimes if I'm talking to people and, you know, in audience like this, if you know, kind of, you know, you were when you mentioned almonds, that thing went up in me because I won't have almonds in our shop, and I don't even know enough about it. I've just heard enough about the shitstorm that occupies a lot of almonds, California anyway. They're probably on fire at the moment, actually, but sorry, that was very negative. But yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think it's that thing around, I mean, we talk about it quite a lot at Better Food Traders, about negative marketing versus positive marketing, and it's a difficult balance when you know that for some customers the sustainability, the, you know, climate and nature is part of their motivation, but trying to do that in a positive way rather than in a shaming or guilt making. You know, no one's going to buy a veg box because they feel guilty. Yeah. They're going to buy a veg box. Might. Or they might, but
that's
like,
not why we want them.
It's not
because
it's also
it tastes incredible.
Yeah, it's not the mainstream buyer. And yeah, you want to talk about it tastes amazing, it looks amazing, it's from down the road by this amazing person. It's that, you know, it's the positives.
And by saying something is local, you have implicitly, if not explicitly, contrasted it with the extreme opposite. Yeah. You know, this is, Tesco's were selling apples when we were getting from New Zealand at the same time as we were getting them from the orchards down the road. Yeah. I mean, that's mad. Yeah. And so we didn't have to say, look how evil these guys are. Evil. We wouldn't say evil, you know, it's just madness. Look where we're getting our apples from. We just had to say, guys, look where we're getting our apples from. And we let Riverford do the negative marketing for us, because all of our customers follow them anyway. And they're very good at doing it in such a way that doesn't feel shameful.
Yeah,
it's
the act, and how can you take action, I guess. Dan, how does Unicorn balance that sort of messaging?
Well, our department is called Education and Marketing, so we always say that education sort of comes first and is one and the same as our marketing, that we don't kind of, we're not marketing for its sake, we're trying to spread the word. We use a lot of our budget to go into schools and do as little as sort of nursery age, which is really fun. And then we go into universities. I actually had a really great session recently in a local sixth form college, and just talking about co-ops and alternative forms of governance and different business structures. And loads of kids are kind of, you know, haven't ever thought about this. And you get really great responses. And we see it as like, these are going to be the customers of tomorrow. So hopefully we can kind of influence some change there. But yeah, with the sort of negative messaging, we avoid it at all costs. We always focus on the positives. We focus on what we have got and not what we haven't. We, interestingly, have never used the word vegan. We are a completely vegan shop. And we don't advertise as such because we didn't want it to be this reserve for this special group. I mean, veganism was quite a radical prospect in '96, very different to what it is now. And it's amazing. We still got people coming in and they'll have been in the shop for half an hour and they'll say, where are the eggs? And I just say, we don't sell eggs. Some people have different responses. But I'd say with the exception of, for me, where I have had to kind of cross the line, is when growers experience just absolute devastation. And I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat that. And I don't think we should. You know, there's a way of sort of, talking about them in a positive light and drawing attention to them, but I don't think there's any way to kind of, polish that one. It's just, sometimes you have got to say, and weather, it tends to be weather events.
Okay. One more question, or a couple of more questions maybe from the room. A gentleman at front, here, front row.
Thank you. bit of a big picture question. I mean, the real farming conferences have been going for some 15, 16 years now. Started with 100 people. You look at it now, it's several thousand people. You know, the movement has really moved forward significantly in the last 15 years, but that's mostly been on the production side. You know, we're seeing, you know, growth in regenerative farming, agroecology, organic farming growing significantly. And retail has breaking through on retail has really much more struggled. You know, we've got most of the main players here in the room today. We've seen Hisby disappear. We've seen Chard up in Lochavar, now Chard up in Glasgow, really struggling. And it's been a real battle to break through in the retail sector, to the point at which I suggest it's limiting the growth on the production side now because we can't find the outlets. So I wondered if the panel had any innovative ideas how we could really break through and have systemic change in the retail sector, so the work that you're doing and the projects that you're selling is available readily all around the country.
Thank you for that question. I might sort of slightly rephrase that, or just think about it as, is there anything we haven't talked about today that would help you as a business, or that you would see structurally benefiting food retail? Is that okay to kind of phrase it that way? Or, you know, yeah, what is that big picture? Like, is it about policy? I mean, just very briefly to recap, but there are some, you know, useful policies coming through. There's interest in the National Food Strategy finally, but what for you would be the big kind of structural changes that would actually help food retail, independent food retail?
I think the first thing is appetite amongst the younger generations to get stuck into high streets. I think there is quite an adversity to being in that position because it comes with a whole load of package of rents and rates and business acumen and all that stuff. And I think it's been owned by a very conventional market. And if you look at what's been going on the high streets of independence, never mind the organically food independence, but just general independence, it's been a rocky road for generations, and it's got more and more difficult for them. So it's very difficult to attract the volume of people to want to take those kind of risks or gather together as a cooperative to take a joint risk. I mean, otherwise, I think we would be in a materially different place. If you look at the demand for younger generations to get stuck into growing and get their hands dirty, it's a bit of a no-brainer, and it's really, really nourishing, and it's really good, and I want to do it, and it's a radical action. But I think translating that to doing business and looking after customers on a daily basis, I think is very different. And I also think that the younger generation at the moment, they're evolving in terms of how they respond to the idea of service and hospitality. There's a sort of an egalitarian thing in the mix in there, which I absolutely love hospitality and looking after people in that way. But I know a lot of people who feel like it's a bit of a barrier, like I'm being subservient to you sort of thing. And I think there's a lot of things that are rippling out, and we're all learning. And I love listening to younger generations talking about some of this, which I don't get to do very often, but sometimes. And when I was at the zoo, I was. So those kind of entrepreneurial spirits, trying to get them to look at food retail. Yeah, I think it is entrepreneurial spirit, but it's also the mechanisms by which you can actually do it. And I think cooperatives have a much better chance of filling that space in volume. And then it's all about what our messaging is out there to make us meaningful size. When you look at the continent, and it's a whole different picture. That's partly because of government subsidies which have gone into the production side to stimulate that. But then it's also because of the nature of what it is to be in Germany, in France, in Holland, is that it fosters chains of organic supermarkets, effectively. And I'm not saying that they're fantastic, but certainly Beer Cop have got an awful lot to say, which I think is amazing. And could we do that in this country? We've got a very, very different culture. We don't lean into cooperative nature nearly as well as some of the people on the continent do.
Dan, do you want to respond?
I'd like to end on a really positive example of this, which is Kindling Farm, who we work really closely with. And I don't think Kindling would have been able to buy the farm without the guarantee of Unicorns Market there. You know, we did our first crop planning with them And we're just growing on a tiny portion of the farm next year. But it's massive and it's exciting, and they're going to explore markets in Liverpool as well because the farm itself is between the two. But look, I mean, collaboration and cooperation and working together and dismantling this idea of competition. I'm always amazed at how little small businesses are willing to kind of share. And that comes from, obviously, years of sort of being indoctrinated by the co-op way. But how can you pool resources, work together? That's got to be part of the solution, I think. And I think the Kindling Farm example is a great one to kind of keep an eye on.
Thank you, that's exciting. Josh, what structural, big picture things would you like to change?
So I think I touched on it earlier, and I'm not really setting out a political stance here, but if you could find a way of decreasing the proportion of which British households spend on rent and mortgages, you would have more space for higher spend on food. I'm not going to go any more political than that. But then on the cultural side of things, I think that sharing, I've written down, relationship is resilience. As a retailer, if we were purely transactional with our suppliers, we wouldn't be here today because of their support towards us. If we were purely transactional with our customers, we wouldn't be here today because there's a relationship there. The market garden wouldn't exist today if it weren't for those relationships. We're making a move this month to move our online shop, to a UK-based online system called Growing Good, from Shopify, which is a US-based thing that we're spending loads of money on, and actually it's not really serving us. It's amazingly powerful, but we're not using it. So we want to make everything we do relational, and so that one of the hopes is that actually becomes a relationship, not just a transaction. If we can create a culture in this country that is relational instead of just transactional, there's always going to be transaction. It's always going to be part of it because we're transacting. But if we can move forward as a nation to actually care about the person we're buying from, the person we're selling to, then that's going to have a ginormous impact. And I think, what we're trying to do is create an alternative to the supermarket system. The supermarket system survives on the fact that there are no relationships. It's pure transaction. So if we can change that culture and be part of that, all power to everyone who's trying to do this.
Great, that is a lovely note to end on. I'm just going to wrap up. We've had a couple of questions online. Where should people go for advice if they want to start a new box scheme or a shop in an urban area? What advice would you give to people starting out in indie food retail? I would take that opportunity and plug our organisation, which is Better Food Traders. So we are a support organisation. We do loads of business training. We run webinars. We have one-to-one business support. We do peer learning groups. So have a look at Better Food Traders. 2 other announcements. So coming right after this at 4:00, we're actually running a kind of networking and gathering space. You're all very welcome to come. We've got some drinks and food, and we'll be at the Plough Inn from 4:00, and very much a space to continue the conversations. If you want to talk to Phil or Josh or Dan or me, we'd love to see you there. And we're also going to be doing that in collaboration with our friends at Fibre Shed and UK Grain Lab and Sustain. So it's all people working in networks of supply and these routes to market for agroecological produce. So it should be a really interesting bunch of people, really good conversation. Please do join us. And then, just briefly to say, Better Food Traders is about to run our business support week. So we do that every January. End of January, we've got a week of focused one-to-ones for our members. So you can join and be a member. But for people outside of the membership, we do a number of workshops that you can also just come along to and buy a ticket, and they're sort of £10, £20. So you can look on our Eventbrite page and see if you're interested in any of that, those workshops. So a final thing I just want to say, this is your call to action. You know, we've all sat here and heard about these 3 amazing businesses. They're all doing the work that lets you make a different choice. So, you know, I think we're probably all coming from the same angle. We're all at the Oxford Real Farming Conference, but, you know, your food choices matter. It's not just what you're buying, it's not just how it's grown and how it's produced, but it's where you're buying from, it's who you're buying from. So, you know, do you want to support supermarket shareholders or do you want to support businesses like these? Make that choice. Okay. Thank you.